Sorry, someone came in my office and needed me for a moment. So let's continue talking about the Great Schism. So the French king needed money. And so he goes to the church for money. And the Pope is like, oh, no, you had not. You're not going to get money from the church. This is the church. It's not for fighting wars and stuff like that. Well, Philip then arrested the Pope. Yes, he did. He did that. He arrested the Pope. You don't arrest the Pope, but he did. He arrested the Pope. And so when he arrested the Pope was kind of manhandled a little bit. And eventually he was set free. But damage had been done. And he died from rough handling during his arrest. And so when that Pope died, the French king was very instrumental in making sure that a French Pope was elected. When a French Pope was elected, that Pope moved the see of the papacy to Avignon, a French city. And it stayed in Avignon for 72 years. And this became known as the Babylonian captivity of the papacy. In 1376, a woman by the name of Catherine of Siena visited Pope Gregory XI, and she convinced him to return the papacy to Rome. 2 years later, however, that Pope died. And the College of Cardinals, when they were getting together to elect the new Pope, they were adamant that there was not going to be a French Pope. They were not going to allow the see of the papacy to return into French hands. So they brought in guards, and everyone voted in an Italian Pope. Well, the French cardinals came out of that saying, we demand a recount, as it were. We were coerced into voting for a person that we did not want to vote for. And so they elected their own Pope. So now there's two popes. And loyalty's divided because, okay, if you're French, do you support the French Pope because he's French? Do I support the Italian Pope because he's Italian? Which Pope is Pope? Who is the for real head of the church? Who is the direct descendant of St. Peter? This has never happened before. So we see this going on for quite some time, for several decades. And then there is a conciliar movement. In 1409, the Council of Pisa begins, and a third pope is introduced. Now, the idea was this guy is we're going to bring in this guy, he's going to become pope, and the other two popes are going to step down. But the other two popes say, not happening. So there were three popes. Yes, that's right. You heard me. 3 popes. And people are very critical of the church at this time. So 1414, we see the Council of Constance beginning, and the church is looking around saying, you know what? This is ridiculous. We can't do this. There cannot be 3 popes. And so the other 3 popes are convinced to step down, and Martin V is elected as pope. Now, you can imagine if that was happening, if you're Southern Baptist and we had, 3 or 4 presidents of the Southern Baptist Convention, and the entire Southern Baptist Convention is everybody, fussing and complaining about who the actual president of the convention is, or if you're Catholic, and you've got all these different popes, what are you going to do? There's criticisms of the church. And the guy who's known as sort of the morning star of the Protestant Reformation is John Wycliffe, an Englishman. John Wycliffe was very open about with his criticisms of the church. He stated, among other things, very emphatically that popes should not have worldly power, that the papacy was not a position for a politician, that it was a position for a man who was over the spiritual needs of the church. He also started attacking certain practices of the church, practices like indulgences, the veneration of saints, pilgrimages to holy sites. He attacked those practices, saying that I don't see those in the Bible, and since they're not in the Bible, why are we doing them? And why are you saying that people have to do them, and that some people are more special for doing them if other people can't do them? He also promoted the translation of the Bible into the vernacular, or the common language. Now, this is a big deal. And we tend to look at this, and Protestants have a tendency to to say, oh, well, the Catholic Church, they wanted to keep the Bible in Latin because they wanted all the power so that they could manipulate and corrupt and say whatever it is they wanted to say. Well, I'm sure that there were some who felt that way. However, it's a whole bunch of Catholics who are in heaven, okay? And so some Catholics, honestly and truly wanted to preserve the integrity of the Scriptures. And so there is a concern that if the Bible is translated into the vernacular, one, how is it going to be translated? Is it going to be translated in as accurate a way as possible? And we see even some controversy now over, which version of the Bible is the best. Do I look at the NIV, the ESV, the HCSB, the KJV? What version, what translation of the Bible is the most accurate? So there's that. There's an issue of accuracy. There's also an issue of, if we translate the Bible into the common language for any person who can read to be able to read or to hear in their own language, are they going to interpret the Scriptures properly? Because look at what's going on in our church right now. Look at what's going on. We had 3 popes, right? We had 3 popes. We've got people doing corrupt things. If the church hierarchy as it is right now is having issues, then what's going to happen if we translate the Bible into English, into French, into German? What's going to happen? And so there is a very real concern over the integrity of the Scriptures. But John Wycliffe is saying, no, we need to have the Bible in the vernacular so that people can read for themselves. That way they can know if their leaders are telling them something that's incorrect. He died in 1384. He was protected his entire life. He was protected from execution by being denounced as a heretic and all of that. He was protected from all of that. He died of natural causes in 1384, an old man. But in 1415, at the Council of Constance, they dug him up and they burned his bones as a heretic, just to make sure. So that concludes our discussion on the Middle Ages. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. We'll pick up next time with the Renaissance.